Charlie Meow about the trash brown. Is the speaker traceable, please?
Okay, I just got message from Tash
Yes.
because some urgent things. She said sorry and prefer to be changed to the last one. That is 2 hours from now.
Okay, so that means we go to the next speaker, whom we all know is Pippa Smart. Like we have heard her many times, a magic lady, and she is an independent consultant and advisor and trainer of publisher, and she hails from Oxford, United Kingdom. And she is going to present on the challenges and benefits of preprints. So Pippa Smart, please.
Dr. Aslam, thank you so much for your introduction.
You're welcome. Always welcome.
Thank you. And
nice to
welcome.
see you.
It's lovely to see you again and to see so many people here at this meeting today. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk. I'm going to share my screen now with my slides, and I'm going to talk about quite a hot topic in publishing at the moment, which is preprints. Now, there is quite a lot of confusion around preprints and some misunderstandings. So I hope my talk will provide an introduction to the subject and also perhaps raise some further questions for you. I'm sorry, the reason I'm looking around is I realize I don't have a watch. So I've got my phone in front of me so I can keep to time. So what I want to briefly talk about is how preprints have changed the article workflow and how they are disrupting publishing. I'll present a very brief history of preprint servers and then consider how journals are working with preprints. And then finally, to close, talking about the benefits and disadvantages of preprints and where we think we will go into the future. So I'd like to start with the changing workflow. The traditional journal workflow, starting on the left and moving to the right in this schematic, is that authors create an early draft of their articles. This is revised normally internally and privately, only shared with their supervisor, their colleagues, perhaps their friends and family. And at some point, the author or the author group has a version of their article that they think is suitable for publication, and they submit it to a journal. It then goes through the regular process, as we all know, and then hopefully, with luck, the version of record is then published on the journal website. How preprints are disrupting this is that authors are creating their early drafts. They are still showing them to their colleagues, still revising them and polishing them. But where the disruption occurs is that instead of that early draft only being considered a private document until it is submitted to the journal and finally published, authors are taking this early draft and they are effectively publishing it by posting it on a preprint server where it becomes a public document where anybody can read the article and can use it. After the article has been made public on the preprint server, it is then submitted to a journal for the traditional publishing route. And at the end of the journey, when the final article, which has been revised following peer review, it has been edited, it has been typeset, it's been designed, it's published in the journal, then that version of record, which is the final published version, is linked back to this very early version, which was the preprint. So the preprint is the early version before it has been submitted to a journal. Having said that, there are some qualifiers here. Sometimes articles are put onto a preprint server at some point during that journal submission system. So whilst normally the article that is on the preprint server is identical to the submitted version, sometimes authors will take revised versions and put them on preprint servers, and this muddles the area. But for the purpose of this talk and for the purpose of defining preprints, consider them to be the same as the submitted version to the journal, or perhaps the version prior to that. So the article is put on a preprint server, and then the authors notice or they're informed of some minor changes to make before they submit it to a journal. So moving to the history, where did preprints come from? Well, they have a very long history. They go back to at least 1991, when Archive, which is the very famous mathematical and physics preprint server, was launched by Paul Ginsberg. It originally out of Cornell, although it has moved. And Archive currently has nearly 2 million articles. It receives nearly 16,000 submissions per month. So there are 16,000 new articles added to Archive every month. And going back to that previous workflow, the articles that go on a preprint server are not peer-reviewed, they are not checked, they are not validated. All that happens is an author uploads their article. The people that run the preprint server will normally do a very, very quick check to make sure it is not spam and that it's suitable for the server, but it is not peer-reviewed, it is not validated, and that's a very important principle. Within the Archive community, the reason this was initiated back in 1991 is in some areas, particularly areas like high energy physics, the science is moving so quickly that by the time an article was published in a journal, it was out of date. It was too late, everybody knew. So the preprints provided an instant publication to keep the community informed in a way that was much quicker than a journal could satisfy. Swiftly following Archive was SSRN, which was originally launched to satisfy the needs of the social sciences and particularly the economics research community. Since then, it's been purchased by Elsevier, and it's now a multi-subject repository with articles on all sorts of topics, including some physics topics, humanities, social science, medical sciences. It has the whole range of topics. This is also very big, with over 1 million articles available in its library. And an important point about preprint servers is that they are free to view. So not only are the authors not charged for adding their articles, so they are free for the authors, but also it is free for any reader to open the preprint server, search, find an article, read it, download it, and use it. Now the preprint servers did not grow very quickly. They were very popular in the physics community and in some areas of the social sciences community. But it has really been the last 5 years, and especially the last 3 pandemic years, where preprint servers have really taken off. They have exploded. And part of the reason for this is the launch of bioRxiv, which specifically covers the life sciences. And then at the start of the pandemic, or just a year before, the launch of medRxiv, which is specifically for medical research. And as you can imagine, in the last few years, researchers have used the medRxiv particularly to ensure that COVID research has been made public much faster than journals could cope with. So these preprint servers have really taken off. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of them. Now, the ones that are listed here are like the needle in the haystack. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of preprint servers. Many of them are run by universities and faculties, but these are perhaps the most popular and the ones that are used mostly by the research community. So how do they integrate with journals? And there are many different ways that preprints and preprint servers integrate with journals. And I've divided this for myself into what I'm calling 6 steps to acceptance. Step 1 is not really accepting them. And this is where journals don't like preprint servers. They don't believe in them, and they feel that articles should not be made public until they've gone through peer review, until they've gone through revision, and until they've been validated and accepted for publication. This is often called the Inglefinger rule, which is that a journal only wants to accept for submissions articles that have not been made public. So there are still many journals have a very uneasy relationship with preprints, and they don't accept submissions, many of them, which have been made public. But this has changed. In the last 2 or 3 years, there are fewer and fewer journals that refuse submissions that have already been made public. What is happening in more areas are publishers and journals are saying that authors should be allowed to put their articles on a preprint server. So journals are saying, we accept it. So if the authors want to do it, we are okay with it. So we don't necessarily encourage it, but we do allow it. The third step is active encouragement. And PLOS is a good example of this, where PLOS say, we actively encourage every author to put their research in the public domain on a preprint server before they submit it to the journal. And the reason for this is to ensure rapid communication of science, whilst acknowledging that what is on a preprint server has not been validated by peer review. And in fact, PLOS goes so far as to say to its authors, if you haven't put your article on a preprint server, we will do it for you. If you would like your article to go on a preprint server, when you submit it, you tick a box and we will put it on bioRxiv or medRxiv on your behalf. The next step is active participation, and there are several journals that are integrating their systems with some preprint servers. For example, The Lancet has integrated with SSRM. So if an author submits to The Lancet, their articles are immediately put on SSRN with a note saying that the article is under consideration at the Lancet group of journals. So some journals are actively integrating their systems with preprint servers. Another form of integration is in review, which is it's owned by Research Square and is part of the Springer Group now. And in this system, if an author submits their article to any of the Biomed Central journals, not only is their article put on Research Square, but also the integration between Research Square and the submission system used by BMC means that a reader can not only access the article on the Research Square preprint server, but they can see where the article is in the submission process. So they will be told through a dialogue on the right that the article is under review, or that it's in revision, or that it's been accepted for publication. I'm still not entirely sure how they deal with articles that have been rejected. And this is a screenshot of what it looks like. So this article, you can see the red text above it saying this preprint is under consideration at Cardiovascular Diabetology, which is a BMC journal. And on the right of the screen, you see the peer review timeline that gives the current status of the article. So this keeps readers and also authors informed of the status. There is another form of integration where journals are actually providing a reviewing service layering on the preprint server. And how this works is that an author submits their article to the preprint server and also asks for it to be reviewed. And Review Commons was an initiative during COVID, but it is continuing now, particularly with eLife and with the EMBO journal, whereby the article is on the preprint server and an application is made to the editorial office of eLife or EMBO. Their editorial office sends the article out for review. The reviewer reports are then posted directly onto the preprint server, and it currently integrates with bioRxiv and medRxiv, so that readers can actually review the preprint they can read the preprint and they can see next to the preprint the review that has been posted on it. So they can read the reviews of the article, which might say this is a terrible article. So the authors are taking a chance that their work will be reviewed and heavily criticized in public. The next stage, and really this is the final stage, is where a journal has effectively merged itself with a preprint server. So it is providing a single platform that operates both as a preprint server and as a journal. And F1000 Research is the epitome of this. So F1000 Research is, you can call it a journal. I think it describes itself as a publishing platform. When you submit to F1000 Research, the editorial office will do some basic checks. And the basic checks are, is it within scope? And they'll run a plagiarism check, and they'll make sure they have all of the details from the authors, as normal. At that point, the article is published. So it appears on F1000 Research effectively as a preprint. It is then sent out for review, as normal. But the review reports are then posted against the article, which appears on F1000. At that point, it is the author's decision whether they want to revise the article or just leave it. And so at this point, it is like a preprint server, which offers peer review. The authors can revise the article, it then goes out for review again. If the reviewers say that the article is validated, so in other words, it is acceptable, and for a normal journal, this would mean that the article is published. At that point, the article is nominally accepted by the journal, although visually it appears very different. Sorry, it appears very similar. But at that point, the article itself then goes into the indexing systems. So articles which appear on F1000 but have not been validated or ticked by the reviewers only appear on F1000's platform. Once they have been ticked and approved by the reviewers, they then go into an indexing system. At the moment, it's indexed by various systems. It does not have an impact factor, but some of the articles appear in some of the major indexes. Another way of integrating is overlay journals. So these are mostly in the area of physics, and these integrate with arXiv. So effectively, the articles are published on arXiv, and the journals perform peer review. And if they accept the article, it is included in their table of contents as a valid article, but the article actually appears on arXiv. So whereas F1000 is a single platform, these are journals which provide a website of a selected group of articles to say these are good articles that we have validated, but the articles themselves are published on the arXiv server. Now, 2020 really was a watershed moment, particularly for medical research, and it was because of the need to rapidly disseminate research on COVID. And several of the medical journals that had been very resistant to preprints changed their mind throughout the pandemic. And the number of articles that have gone on preprint servers and the number of journals that are now accepting preprints has changed. So the last 2 years has seen a dramatic increase in preprints. And I think it is fair to say that prior to the last 3 years, preprints may or may not have become a major disruptor. Now they are part of the landscape. We are past the question of whether preprints will exist, and we are now in the situation of saying, how do we work with them, because they are here to stay. They're not going away. And the New England Journal of Medicine, which was the most resistant journal, has now announced that it is accepting articles that have previously been issued as preprints. So that's how journals are working. And my apologies, there is a lot to cover in preprints. It's quite a big area. There are lots of advantages of preprints. Of course, they provide rapid publication, fast circulation. They also allow authors to get priority on their research without any delay throughout publishing. They support open science and the idea of transparency and sharing. They also allow authors to control publication because they're no longer reliant on an editor's decision to publish their article or not. They also allow for multiple versions to be available. And they also finally allow for community feedback. Many of the preprint servers allow people to comment on articles. And so it extends review to community discussion. But there are also problems with preprints. There's reputation damage for authors. If an author issues an article on preprints that is heavily flawed, their reputation could be damaged. Whereas if they had submitted that to a journal and the article had never been published, their reputation would not have been affected. They also promote bad science, and they promote bad science because readers often do not appreciate that they are reading something that has not been validated and not been peer-reviewed. And this comes to the top point about quality assurance. There is very little quality assurance of anything that is issued on a preprint server, and that is problematic. It also leads to inflation of results because authors can issue lots and lots of articles on the same topic. They can do this salami slicing of their research because there is nobody to stop them on a preprint server. And they are open to political influence and abuse. And there are instances of articles which are presenting specific political viewpoints that would never have been published by a good quality journal, but they do appear and they are being used through news resources and they are being cited. And in fact, this problem with preprints is starting to be discussed. And there's several articles where editors are questioning how do we ensure that readers are constantly made aware that what they are reading has not been validated, and therefore they must be extremely careful with reusing any content that they have read on a preprint. So there are lots of challenges for journals and for editors. One challenge is citation. Do you allow your authors to cite preprints? There is no right and wrong here. Some journals do allow citation, others don't, but it is a question for each journal. What is your policy? Do you allow submissions that have appeared as preprints? And there's a lot of author confusion because authors don't know whether journals allow this because journals don't mention it in their author guidelines. There are concerns over articles that have been corrected or retracted, that this news does not get back to the preprint. So the readers of the preprint don't know that that article has been retracted because it was fatally flawed or it had an ethics problem. There is also the challenge that it questions the need for journals. If preprints work in the future, why do we need journals? And I think this is a much bigger theoretical problem that we will need to address in the future. But finally, you know, I think we are in a situation where preprints are now another brick in the scholarly wall. This is where we are. There are various resources which are in this presentation, which I assume will be made available to you. But I'd like to thank you for listening, and we will be talking about this in a few minutes at the panel discussion. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Pippa Smart. It is always learning to listen to your presentations and talk. Thank you very much. Now we go on to the next speaker, and he is Dikran Toroser. I apologize if there is any error in pronunciation. Dikran Toroser, who is a post